Good evening and welcome to Inside City Hall for Tuesday, October 21st, 2025. I'm Bobby Kuza in for Errol Lewis. After trading jabs on the campaign trail, Zohran Mamdani, Curtis Sliwa, and Andrew Cuomo will meet face-to-face again tomorrow night for a debate at LaGuardia Performing Arts Center in Queens, hosted by New York One, WNYC Gothamist, and The City. Our Ayanna Harry is in Long Island City right now with more on what to expect from the debate tomorrow and the candidates in tonight's top story. Good evening, Ayanna.
Good evening, Bobby. When the three leading mayoral contenders walk into that theater tomorrow night, it will be the final opportunity for all three of them together to speak directly to New Yorkers. And as we learned today, the candidates' debate prep styles, it's just as diverse as their campaigns.
The whole city is engaged, and that is why I think that this is the thriller in Manila.
The stage is being set. The countdown is on for one final showdown in the race for New York City mayor. 7 p.m. Wednesday night, New York One will host the second and last debate before New Yorkers head to the polls to select the next mayor.
This is the most important debate that we've had in a very long time.
Independent candidate Andrew Cuomo, Democrat Zohran Mamdani, and Republican Curtis Sliwa will spar in the 90-minute live televised debate, standing on stage at the LaGuardia Performing Arts Center in Queens. The candidates will have the opportunity to ask each other a question, and there will be a lightning round.
I'm ready.
Sliwa telling New York One when it comes to debate prep.
As I always prepare, by going into the subways, by talking to average, everyday working people, because they'll give me a lot of concepts and ideas that I can throw out on the stage.
Mamdani's expectations?
I think it will be more of the two of them speaking to each other and me speaking to the needs of New Yorkers.
And Andrew Cuomo opened up about what will be the key to his debate performance.
It's a balance. You don't want to be too aggressive because then, everyone has a critique. You're too aggressive. They say you're a bully. You're not aggressive enough. They say you're too soft.
New York One is hosting the Wednesday night debate along with WNYC Gothamist and the news outlet The City. Viewers can catch the political crossfire live by watching New York One, NewYork1.com, or the New York One YouTube channel. Political analyst J.C. Polanco believes this debate could be a decision-making moment for New Yorkers who still don't know who to vote for.
They're looking at this as a job interview. Are you qualified? What's your vision? What in your background says you can handle an opportunity like this? And can we trust you with the keys to City Hall and to be CEO of New York City government?
And Bobby, right now, the sidewalk here on Van Dam Street, it's pretty quiet, but tomorrow it is going to look very, very different. We are told all three campaigns, they are rallying up dozens and dozens of supporters. They will be here cheering on the candidates as they walk inside to the New York One debate stage, Bobby.
All right, Ayanna Harry, thank you so much for that report. And in other debate news, on Friday, we will have the general election debate in the race for Manhattan District Attorney. That'll begin at about 7:25 right here on Inside City Hall. Meanwhile, when they weren't battling each other or preparing for tomorrow night's debate, the candidates for mayor were presenting their visions for the city's future today. Our Kelly Mena joins us with more. Good evening, Kelly.
Good evening, Bobby. And as you mentioned, it's not just about mudslinging when it comes to running for mayor. You also have to present your future for the city. Some of the candidates were out on the trail today presenting those ideas. Early voting may be starting soon, but that's not stopping candidates in the race for mayor from proposing big ideas.
Making the subway system better.
Ex-Governor Andrew Cuomo unveiled details of a new proposal allowing the city to take control of subway construction projects. Cuomo argued the city owns the subway system and leases it to the New York City Transit Authority.
Change that lease. Let New York City do the capital construction. The capital budget for New York City Transit is about $40 billion. The regional capital budget is about $55 billion. Imagine if you actually got that money working. Imagine if you could actually spend it. That is hundreds of stations remodeled.
Cuomo's proposal came as he was talking to the city's top business and civic leaders Tuesday morning about his vision for the future. Separately, Zohran Mamdani said he's looking to cut waste at the city's Department of Education.
When I am mayor, I want to transform our DOE procurement process through a three-pronged policy proposal called Curing Procurement.
The Democratic nominee alleges that there is careless overspending at the DOE due to redundant and inefficient contracts. He's looking to decrease contract spending by 10% and
to ensure that every single dollar we spend within the Department of Education is a dollar that is furthering our mission of delivering excellent education to students across the 5 boroughs.
Meanwhile, Republican nominee Curtis Sliwa continues to defy critics and some businessmen by staying in the race.
I trust the people. They are able to choose the next mayor. Billionaires are not picking the mayor. They've been wrong every step of the way.
Amid the mounting pressure, Sliwa got support from the city's 5 GOP chairs. In a joint statement, they said Republican voters are not going to vote for Andrew Cuomo and that Sliwa is their chosen candidate against Mamdani. President Trump also weighing in.
If he dropped out, he's not going to win, and not looking too good for Cuomo either. I don't know that I want to get involved. It's really a question of would I rather have a Democrat or a communist? And I would rather have a Democrat than a communist.
Sliwa has vowed to stay until the end.
So let the process continue. The naysayers, it's never had an impact on me.
Early voting starts this Saturday. Sliwa said he'll be voting then, and the election is in 2 weeks, Bobby.
So, Kelly, this issue with the MTA that Andrew Cuomo was talking about today, he's mentioned it before, but this is a little bit of a new initiative that he's talking about to give the city more control over the MTA.
Yes, it's not a new idea necessarily from Cuomo, but new as a campaign idea going into the final weeks of the election. Obviously, when you're running for mayor, it's about presenting these bold ideas, and hearing it for the first time, I think, today took some people by surprise. It's interesting to hear that maybe he wants the city to take over power of the subway system. We know that that's a very touchy and sensitive topic for New Yorkers, but it's never been done before, so that would be an interesting move. I don't necessarily know that it would be viable, but definitely something that he's looking at the moment.
Are you getting the sense that the candidates are sharpening their attacks as we're getting down into these last couple of weeks before Election Day? Did you get that sense from Andrew Cuomo's speech today?
Yes, sharpening attacks and trying to focus their message, right? Because the last thing you want is to have a muddled message in the final days. You want it to be clear, you want it to be concise, and something that voters can take into the ballot box when they're deciding who they want the next mayor to be. And I think we saw some of that in the last debate from Mamdani, who they try to bait him into these discussions, into these arguments, but he stayed on affordability. I think that's something that we'll see tomorrow as well, because you don't want somebody to remember just maybe somebody getting your name wrong as the last thing that they take into deciding who they want to be the next mayor.
And you mentioned in the piece the statement from the Republican county leaders. I mean, this was sort of a show of support for Curtis Sliwa in the face of so many calls for him to get out of the race. Somebody is backing up his insistence to stay in.
Yeah, and I think that's an important signal, that the party supports him, that this isn't about, these business leaders and that this institutional support is leaving Curtis Sliwa in any type of way. This is just to show that this is a difference of opinion, and that obviously he still remains as a major party nominee. And, that's never been done before, seeing such a major party nominee be bullied out of a race. He has, like everybody else, an opportunity to stay in this contest, and I think it was important for them to come out in the face of not just local disagreement, but also the president seems to also not be excited about Curtis Sliwa staying in the race. So that sends a message to him as well that with their support, he's going to stay.
All right, Kelly Mena, thank you so much for that report. It is time now for a break. We have got a packed show tonight. Coming up, we'll tell you what the candidates for mayor are proposing to improve child welfare in the city. Then I'll be joined in studio by Congressman Dan Goldman, who is calling on the NYPD to arrest and charge ICE officers acting unlawfully. And later I'll focus on one ballot proposal aimed at moving local elections to presidential election years. Stay with us. We are back in a minute. Welcome back to Inside City Hall. It is one of the biggest responsibilities that the mayor has, keeping the city's children safe. But how that actually happens and who's held accountable when it doesn't has not made it into the campaign speeches in this mayoral election. As we've been taking a deep dive into the issues in the race, New York One's Annika Pergamon took a closer look at what the candidates' approaches to child welfare are. And she joins me now with more on that story. Good evening, Annika.
And good evening to you, Bobby. And it really is striking that there has been almost no discussion during this entire election as to how any of these candidates would handle child welfare, which is why exactly we took this deep dive. We hear about affordability, we hear about transportation, we hear about housing, but we don't hear about that, which is why we decided to ask the candidates.
Experience, competence, knowing how to do the job.
The city is out of control. The criminals run the streets.
For months, day in and day out, the candidates for mayor have been stumping, repeating their priorities and campaign messages. But one topic they never touch on, child welfare.
I think what it says is that everybody is satisfied with the status quo.
That status quo has included tragedy. Julicia Batties, Jalea Eason, Jameek Maudlin, and others. Children killed in recent years, allegedly by parents or caregivers. These cases illustrate the high stakes for the city's child welfare agency, the Administration for Children's Services. So we tried to ask the candidates how they'd manage the agency tasked with keeping children safe. Democratic nominee Zohran Mamdani declined an interview, but his campaign sent a statement that reads in part, "The priority of my administration's ACS will be to keep families together and ensure parents and children alike are supported. My focus on affordability, from free universal childcare to a rent freeze, will make sure parents have the support they need to raise families in New York City and make sure kids can enjoy safe and happy childhoods." But critics say that vision overlooks ACS's central mission.
It doesn't have much of a sense of reality to it. The purpose of a child welfare system is to protect children. And that seems to have gotten somewhat lost in this conversation. And when you're looking at parents and not looking at the children, you have a lot of children who are being hurt.
Marsha Lowry is a national expert on child welfare and has a pending class action lawsuit against New York over its foster care system. We asked her to assess the candidates' positions. On his website, Andrew Cuomo doesn't have a stated plan for ACS.
What does it say to you that one of the candidates, Andrew Cuomo, has nothing on his website, refused to answer any of our questions in writing or on camera about how he would approach ACS?
Well, that's extraordinary. And so many of the people in official positions and positions to do something about what's happening to kids in foster care and kids who come into foster care are simply just disregarding this issue.
Of the three candidates, only Republican Curtis Sliwa agreed to speak with us.
There's this resistance to break up families. And I get that. You want to keep a family together. But if anyone in that family is giving any reason why that child or those children are in danger, they have to be extricated from that family. The ACS does not have transparency because they hide behind the cloak that this is privacy. There's no doubt there needs to be more transparency.
Well, I hate to take any position agreeing with any of the candidates, but there is some real reality reflected in that statement.
And after this story first aired, we finally did get a statement from Andrew Cuomo's campaign, and it reads, "As mayor, Andrew Cuomo is going to do a top-to-bottom assessment of the entire bureaucracy to see what works and what doesn't. With ACS, obviously, the safety of our children is paramount, and that will always be the prism in which we operate from. However, everyone believes that the goal is to keep families together to the most practical extent possible, and we'd want to break down silos with other agencies to ensure adults get the resources and services they need as well."
So, Annika, this has not gotten a lot of attention in the mayor's race, but this is not a small agency, right? I mean, talk about the size of the staff and the workload that they have.
It's a massive agency, and obviously their task is keeping these vulnerable children safe. So we're talking about nearly 7,000 employees at ACS. They conduct roughly 4,200 investigations every month. So, and the budget is nearly $4 billion, and that includes about $1 billion in vouchers that go to families in need. So under that budget, and with that massive caseload, these workers have a lot on their hands and a lot of responsibility
on their hands.
And it's not just dealing with these kind of case files on children, right? There's other responsibilities that ACS has.
Yeah, there's so many. I mean, they contract with 269 subcontractors that oversee things from, helping children with college applications, with advocacy, helping children who might have been exposed to sexual abuse, all sorts of parental training, drug abuse. There's a very long and complex list of the responsibilities that ACS has, and it also deals with kids who are going through the juvenile justice system. So it is very complex. It should be addressed, or at least on the radar. So, I think that is the concern among many advocates, that whoever steps into this position is doing so without having said what their plan is.
Right. All right. Well, thank you for bringing some attention to it. Annika Pergamon, thank you so much.
My pleasure.
All right, it is time now for a break. Coming up, we'll talk about rising concerns about political violence on Capitol Hill as new threats emerge against House Minority Leader Hakeem Jeffries. We'll bring you the details next. Stay with us. Welcome back to Inside City Hall. A man pardoned by the president after taking part in the January 6th attack on Congress has been arrested after he allegedly threatened to kill the top House Democrat, Congressman Hakeem Jeffries. This is the latest in a string of attacks or alleged threats against prominent political figures of both parties. Evan Kozlov of our Washington, D.C. bureau has the details from Capitol Hill.
These court documents right here outline what led up to the arrest of Christopher Moynihan, a resident of upstate New York that's now facing charges of making a terroristic threat. Investigators writing in the felony complaint that Moynihan wrote in text messages on Friday that he planned to kill Congressman Jeffries in New York City on Monday, writing, "Even if I'm hated, he must be eliminated, and I will kill him for the future."
We will not be intimidated.
On Capitol Hill Tuesday, Jeffries took questions for the first time since the arrest.
When it comes to these extremists out there, you better watch how you talk when you talk about me.
Moynihan was sentenced to nearly 2 years in prison in 2023 for his involvement in the Capitol attacks on January 6, 2021. Video from that day showed him in the Senate chamber, rummaging through papers on senators' desks. Earlier this year, President Donald Trump pardoned Moynihan, along with the more than 1,500 other January 6 defendants.
The reckless and irresponsible pardons of hundreds of violent felons on January 6 has consequences.
The alleged threat against Jeffries follows a series of attacks targeting political figures in both parties. On the campaign trail last year, there were 2 assassination attempts on then-candidate Donald Trump. This past June, a masked man shot a pair of Democrat lawmakers in Minnesota, killing a state representative and her husband. Authorities said the suspect had a hit list of 45 elected officials, all Democrats. And last month, conservative activist Charlie Kirk was shot dead while he spoke at Utah Valley University.
We denounce violence from anybody, anytime. Those people should be arrested and tried.
Republican House Speaker Mike Johnson condemned the alleged threat of violence against Jeffries, but also claimed that these types of threats and attacks are more common from the left. But Democrats dispute this. And a recent study by the libertarian Cato Institute found that right-wing ideology was more responsible for deadly acts of political violence in the last 5 years than left-wing ideology.
They're calling for the death of elected officials. Please, enough of that. We got to stop it. Stop the rhetoric. Stop all the nonsense.
Moynihan is expected to be back in front of a New York judge on Thursday for a hearing determining if he should be released or not ahead of trial. And this arrest comes as both parties have expressed concerns over their safety. Both Democrats and Republicans have included increased security funding in their legislation to fund the government and end the shutdown. Reporting here on Capitol Hill, I'm Evan Kozlov, Spectrum News.
It is time for a break. Coming up, I'll be joined in studio by Congressman Dan Goldman. We will talk about a number of topics from holding ICE agents accountable in the city, the government shutdown, and more. Stay with us. We are back in a minute. Welcome back to Inside City Hall. Tensions remain high at 26 Federal Plaza in Lower Manhattan, where federal immigration authorities continue to arrest migrants who are appearing for routine hearings. My next guest, Congressman Dan Goldman, is one of many elected officials now calling on the NYPD to arrest and charge ICE agents who abuse their authority. In a letter to Police Commissioner Jessica Tisch, he writes, quote, "No person, regardless of their badge, should be permitted to assault or unlawfully detain any New Yorker without facing consequences." That request comes just a few weeks after one violent incident was caught on camera of an ICE agent pushing a woman to the ground and slamming her head. Congressman Goldman joins me now. His district includes neighborhoods in Manhattan and Brooklyn. He is also a former federal prosecutor. Welcome back to the program.
Thanks for having me.
Us. So you're asking the NYPD to be ready to intervene and potentially arrest ICE agents. I mean, based on what you've seen so far, what do you think they should be arrested for?
Well, it's really what we've seen around the country more than what is happening at 26 Federal Plaza. What is happening at 26 Federal Plaza is egregious and incredibly problematic, and it is the subject of a lawsuit that I and 11 of my colleagues have filed in court. But the NYPD doesn't have jurisdiction at 26 Federal Plaza. It's a federal building. But what we're seeing in Chicago and Portland and Los Angeles with someone getting shot with a pellet gun in the face and these really egregiously violent arrests sometimes, and there's been now documentation, incredible evidence, of United States citizens. That is illegal. The ICE cannot arrest U.S. citizens. And what they're doing then, going and arresting them and then assaulting them, which is really what they're doing, violates New York law. And so I wrote the letter because the NYPD needs to be prepared and trained to try to first de-escalate a situation and make sure that New Yorkers are protected under New York law.
And this could escalate even further if federal troops were sent into New York, as they have been into other cities, which is something that President Trump has threatened to do. Is that something that the NYPD should be prepared for?
Well, look, that really crosses a Rubicon, of course, that we've seen lawsuits around the country. New York City does not need any federal troops right now. We have the greatest law enforcement department in the world. There's no question that crime is an issue. It is going down. We are addressing it. We are perfectly capable of addressing it. The only thing that an invasion of ICE agents and National Guard and military members does is it ratchets up the tension and increases violence. It is simply not necessary, and it should not happen. But we're also seeing, short of military coming in, we're seeing very aggressive masked ICE agents without identification targeting individuals with really no reasonable suspicion to believe that they are certainly not convicted criminals. 70% of those who've been detained at 26 Federal Plaza have no criminal record. I mean, these are people many of whom are trying to lawfully immigrate here. And there's a dragnet of this secret police that is attacking them, arresting them, deporting them without due process. It is un-American.
Well, have you heard anything from Police Commissioner Tisch in response to the letter?
Not yet, no.
Okay. And you have actually been trying to go in and inspect the facility at 26 Federal Plaza on the 10th floor where immigrants are taken and held. You have not been allowed entry. You argue it is your statutory right as a congressman to inspect a detainee facility. Where do things stand with that?
Well, 11 of my colleagues and I have filed a lawsuit because all of us have been prevented from conducting our oversight responsibility as members of Congress of the Department of Homeland Security. We know because the Department of Justice admitted in court and then a judge entered a preliminary injunction that the 10th floor is excessively and unconstitutionally housing and detaining immigrants. But they are the Department of Homeland Security is preventing us from conducting oversight, which we are authorized to do, not just constitutionally as a co-equal branch, but under statute. And we are waiting right now for a decision from the judge on a preliminary injunction motion that has been fully briefed and argued, and we're hoping to get that any day.
And if you were to win on that motion, you would then be allowed entry into the facility at 26 Federal Plaza?
Yes.
All right. So let me ask you on a completely different topic. I mean, there's a lot going on in Washington that we could talk about. There's also a lot not going on because of the federal shutdown. We're now 3 weeks and counting. It seems like both sides are dug in. I don't see any sign of compromise or even negotiation at this point. I mean, should people be prepared for a long shutdown? Is there any end in sight to this?
Well, it's pretty amazing that there is no sign of a negotiation. In fact, there has been no sign of negotiation. There's been no action towards negotiation from Republicans from the start. But in this case, unlike in the big ugly bill, Republicans need Democratic votes. So they are acting as if it's their God-given right to just ram through legislation without negotiating, without reaching a bipartisan agreement. We are prepared, and we would love to open the government. Nobody on the Democratic side wants to see this shutdown. But the Republicans have absolutely targeted and destroyed health care for the most vulnerable Americans, including millions of New Yorkers. And we are standing up because we can, right? We have votes that they need, and we are standing up for the American people to have health care as a right and to have affordable health care that the Republicans are trying to take away. And this is a hill that we are willing to die on because it is that important for the American people.
As this drags on, though, I mean, there are some dangers to a prolonged shutdown, right? I mean, what are some of your concerns in terms of the impact that the shutdown could have on Americans and on your constituents?
Look, there's no question that there's a significant impact, certainly first and foremost to federal employees who are not getting paid. And as this goes on, especially these paychecks are needed to make ends meet. It also will start to impact a lot of government programs that may not have sufficient funding. But what's really egregious about it is that Donald Trump, and I think this is part of the reason why the Republicans have no interest in negotiating, Donald Trump is trying to use the shutdown as an excuse to target and threaten and extort Democratic cities and states, including and especially New York. He has frozen more federal funding in my district than any other district in the country. And he's doing this because he is a wannabe mob boss who's trying to bully his way into an agreement. But it's not going to work. We're not going to cave to the mob boss. And then on the other hand, you have Mike Johnson, who refuses to call us back into Washington where we could negotiate because he is so desperately trying to keep the Epstein files hidden at the direction of Donald Trump.
Let me ask you about electoral politics. You have some critics, particularly on sort of the left flank of the Democratic Party, who have talked about mounting a robust primary challenge to you next year. Reportedly, City Councilwoman Alexa Aviles is interested in a run in the primary. I guess, first of all, do you know the City Councilwoman? Do you have a
we overlap in Brooklyn and work together on a number of things.
So what do you think about the idea of a primary challenge from the left? And, you know, people in your district who think there should be somebody who's further on that end of the political spectrum representing them.
Look, I believe firmly and stand up against Donald Trump because I believe in democracy, and so anyone is welcome to jump in the race. I'm happy to lay out my record as my 3 years in Congress, where I have fought for absolutely everything that I think the district really believes in. And I've been at the forefront not only of standing up to Donald Trump, but also of leading this fight against ICE as just one example, a more recent example. But certainly fighting corruption that this government, this administration is using. And using my experience as a prosecutor and an impeachment lawyer to be a really loud and aggressive voice standing up to the authoritarianism that we're seeing in Washington. And I'll continue to do that. And I'll continue to serve my constituents, all of them, whether they agree with every single policy area of mine or not. I'm very proud to represent the district. I love the district, and I will continue to fight for the district.
And just quickly before we go, you are among the top Democrats who have not endorsed the Democratic nominee for mayor, Zohran Mamdani. Why not endorse the Democratic nominee?
Well, look, regardless of what happens with whoever wins, I am eager to work together to address many of the issues that New York City is facing. And I agree very much with Zohran Mamdani's view that affordability is the number one issue. I support and have always supported universal child care and look forward, if he is mayor, to working with him on that. He and I actually worked on the pilot program for free bus routes together in the state assembly, and I will do everything I can to make life better for New Yorkers and more affordable, regardless of who the mayor is. There's one issue that really jumps out, though, and that is the rise of anti-Semitism in New York City and around the country that has now really bled over into violence and murder. And there are many Jews in New York, including myself, who are fearful because of this rise of anti-Semitism that has now turned violent. And I had a very good conversation with Mr. Mamdani earlier this summer, and I've continued to engage in hoping that he will recognize that regardless of his views on Israel or Gaza, New York Jews are not responsible for any of that, and anti-Semitism here in New York is hate. Hate should not be permitted, and as the leader of the city, it is incumbent upon the mayor to make sure that all New Yorkers, and especially Jews now, given the massive surge of anti-Semitism, feel safe and secure. I hope he can get there. Unfortunately, I have not seen a lot of movement, a lot of concrete steps on his part to acknowledge that concern, but I'm still hopeful.
All right. Doesn't sound like we're getting an endorsement in the last couple of weeks before Election Day, but you've made your views known. Thank you for joining us so much, Congressman Goldman.
Thank you for having me.
All right, it's time now for a break. Coming up, we take you to Riverdale in the Bronx, where residents tell us their top concern is affordability ahead of Election Day. Stay with us. Welcome back to Inside City Hall. Today's neighborhood series in the race for mayor brings us to the Riverdale section of the Bronx. Situated in the borough's northwest section, its total population as of the last census stands at just under 100,000 residents, with a large white and Hispanic population. Despite a larger number of homeowners, residents told New York One that affordability concerns are giving residents pause as to whether they can afford to stay in the community for the long term. Our State House reporter Bernadette Hogan joins me now with more on Riverdale. Good evening, Bernadette.
Good evening, Bobby. And unsurprisingly, these residents of Riverdale said that they like what they're hearing from politicians running for the office of mayor, but they would like to see some follow-through.
It also feels a little bit more like a smaller town where you walk down the street and people are talking to you. You get to know your neighbors really well. So it has that small town charm.
Sandwiched between Yonkers, Manhattan, and the Hudson River, Riverdale sits in the northwestern part of the Bronx. Commuters can drive, catch a bus, or train.
It's so close to the city, yet far enough away. The transportation, you've got Metro North. It's just a walk through the woods for me down to the train. It's there 99.9% of the time.
It has a suburban feel with single-family homes and green space. NYU Furman Center data appears to back it up. Riverdale and Fieldston's homeownership rate stands at 42%, higher than the 32.5% citywide average. Emma Pollock grew up in the neighborhood and now works at the nonprofit Riverdale Neighborhood House.
So in the last 30 years, there's been changing demographics. It's a real mishmash of different groups and folks, different ages.
Focused on supporting families and kids.
More and more we see families having intergenerational households, and then also just trying to bridge connections between different generations.
And embracing older adults.
They are brighter. They are going back to school. They are. 60-year-old, 70, they are going back to school, and they have a lot of potential.
Despite lower median rental prices,
we are bleeding families in New York City. The demographic that is leaving New York City at the highest clip are families with small children.
City Councilman Eric Dinowitz highlights housing and affordability as top concerns.
I think we can have a diversity of housing options everywhere in New York City. The problem is City government wants to incentivize the construction of studio and one-bedroom apartments.
Looking at the mayoral election.
My choice is I'd vote for Andrew Cuomo.
And why is that?
I think he's very experienced. I understand he had some issues, sexual harassment issues and stuff. He says he understands. He may have gotten a little feely-touchy. He apologized. It's an issue.
I'd like to like Mamdani. I would like to, but I don't know that he's got the wherewithal to pull off what he's promising.
Despite boasting heavy Democratic enrollment, comparing 2020 general election data to 2024 in at least one election district shows support for Republican President Donald Trump increased.
Even if he looks okay and is fooling people, he has connections that will damage this entire city. Vote, 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 but not for Mamdani. Doesn't matter who you vote for as long as it's not for him. We need to get up and do something, not just complain about the situation.
I'm going to vote for Mamdani. I have some serious disagreements about some things. He's the candidate who was duly elected by the Democratic Party, and I support our candidate.
Councilman Dinowitz, who is Jewish, says his constituents say they have safety concerns for the city's Jewish population.
They want a mayor who is going to affirm that people have the right to be and to feel safe. And that means, the rhetoric matters.
So Riverdale is one of those neighborhoods, Bobby, that, it has that suburban feel, but it still is the city. You just, you go over the bridge from Manhattan, you land in the Bronx, and you're talking to people about, again, property taxes. That will be a big issue. Education. You've got some of the best high schools in Riverdale. But a lot of these parents and families are trying to decide whether or not they can afford to raise their kids and stay, which of course seems to be the story of the entire city at this moment, Bobby.
All right, Bernadette Hogan, thank you so much for that report. And as a reminder, we also have a voter guide you can check out. You can use the QR code on your screen to take you there. That is where you can find all of our other debates, your ballot, and much more. It is time now for a break. Coming up, New Yorkers will soon head to the ballot box and get a chance to weigh in on 6 ballot proposals, including one that would move city elections to even-numbered years. I'll talk more about it with the Executive Director of Citizens Union next. Stay with us. We're back in a minute. Welcome back to Inside City Hall. Election Day is right around the corner. This Saturday marks the beginning of early voting, with polls open from 9 a.m. to 5 p.m. Early voting then runs through Sunday, November 2nd. New Yorkers will get a chance to weigh in not only on citywide races like mayor and comptroller, but also on 6 ballot proposals. The last proposal, question 6, would move city elections to even-numbered years to align with federal elections. And joining me now to talk more about this is Grace Rouse. She is the Executive Director of Citizens Union, which has been an advocate for even-year city elections. Grace is also the founder of the think tank 5 Borough Institute and a former political reporter on New York One, as our viewers may remember. Welcome back to the program. Thank you for joining us.
Thank you, Bobby.
So, the premise here is pretty simple, right? You're taking city elections for mayor, comptroller, council, borough president, and moving it to a presidential election year. So what is the rationale for this change?
So the rationale is that we have a major problem in New York City with exceptionally low voter turnout in our local races. And we know that voters are willing to go to the polls when presidential contests are on the ballot. So by making a simple shift in the election calendar, we can dramatically boost voter turnout. And that is good for democracy. It means we will have a more representative electorate that is actually going to the polls and choosing our local leaders. It has the added benefit of saving the city some money, about $42 million every other year. So this is really a win-win and a way to address some really troubling declines in voter turnout that we've seen in local races since the end of the 1980s.
And this is not experimental, right? This has been tried out in other cities around the country, right?
Right. I wish I could say New York was leading on this election reform, but we're following in this case. The advantage of following, though, is that we can look at the data and see how this has played out in other cities. So Lots of other big cities, Los Angeles, San Francisco, Baltimore, Austin, states, including California, have made this shift, and they have seen dramatic positive returns in terms of voter turnout in local races. So in New York City, in our last mayoral election in 2021, we hit a record low, 23% turnout in that general election. Fewer than 1 in 4 New Yorkers actually went to the polls. When the White House is on the ballot, when the candidates for president are on the ballot, we often see nearly 3 times as many voters go out. So New Yorkers are willing to go to the polls and vote. They're just staying home when it's a local race. So we need to change that. This is a trend that's been underway really across the country for the last decade as part of an effort to address the declining enrollment and voter turnout, and the results have been incredibly positive.
So this should come with a big disclaimer, which is that even if this passes on November 4th, this does not become law, right? This is not binding. It would still require action on the part of the state legislature.
That would be far too simple if we could vote on November 4th and then have this take effect. So this effectively will send a message to Albany, should it pass, as we expect. When it has been on the ballot in other parts of the country, it has passed by really wide margins. It's an incredibly popular reform. So on the other side of November 4th, this would send a message to Albany that New York City voters want to make this change. They're ready to make this change. But then the ball is in Albany's court. So this requires a state constitutional amendment, which means that 2 consecutive state legislatures needs to approve it. And then it goes before the voters of New York for that constitutional referendum.
So right, a statewide ballot question similar to what we're seeing here in the city. Now, I think the main counter argument to this is that local elections, you want the focus to be on local issues, and in a presidential election year, national issues are sucking all the oxygen out of the room and people are not focused on local issues. So how do you address that as you advocate for even year elections?
I, like you, follow every twist and turn in the mayor's race, right? And I can safely assume that viewers of this program are doing the same thing, right? We are tuned in. We are engaging in local issues. In my dream world, every New Yorker would be following this race as closely as all of us and your audiences. But that is just not the reality. It's not happening. We sadly are outliers. And we know that when most voters go to the polls, the average voter is doing their homework on election day or just before they go. I'm sure your phone blows up just like mine from people who are texting you, who should I vote for in my city council race? How should I vote on these ballot proposals, right? They're looking to get informed as they go to the polls. That's a really common thing. We know that when voters go to vote for president, they'll be doing their homework before they go to the polls. And we think that the conversations that are so important, thankfully we have a very robust and active local news media market in New York, those will continue. We will continue closely covering, thanks to the team at New York One, the issues that are most important to New Yorkers. But by making the shift, we will ensure that far more New Yorkers are playing an active role in our democracy, have a direct stake in choosing the leaders who are going to have the power to set policy for the future of New York. That is so important. This is a time when we are seeing declining trust in government. When more people are casting the ballot and feeling like they are playing an important role in choosing the leaders of this city, that strengthens our democracy. It means that we have a more representative electorate, and that's good for the city as a whole.
There's some logistical issues too, right? I'm thinking about the Board of Elections having to handle even more races than they do. I mean, in a presidential election year, you got a ballot with president, Congress, state senate, and assembly races, and now you're throwing all the city races onto. I mean, we're talking about a multi-page ballot,
yeah, so
right?
This would be a longer ballot. We just put out at Citizens Union a big report looking at the issue of ballot drop-off. The idea that when you have a longer ballot, the question we were trying to answer is what happens? Do voters complete their entire ballot? What can we learn from other cities who have made this reform? So ballot drop-off is something that happens under our current system when we have odd year elections. It continues to happen when you shift to even years, but the ballot drop-off rates in other cities are frankly so negligible compared to the massive gains in voter turnout. those concerns really are being answered by the data. They're not anything that we need to worry about because the voter turnout is, 2-3 times what it is under an odd year election system.
Well, we will see what the voters decide on November 5th. Grace Rao, Citizens Union, thank you so much for joining us.
Thanks, Bobby.
All right, that is going to do it for tonight's show. Be sure to join us tomorrow when New York One will host the second and final debate in the race for mayor at 6:30 p.m. I'll be joined by some of our New York One reporters and some political analysts for special coverage before the debate. Then at 7 o'clock, we will be live from LaGuardia Community College. Thanks for watching, everybody, and have a great evening. We will see you the next time on Inside City Hall.